a hybrid approach to supporting those students.
Hello, I'm the other Neil Cowie, and I work at Okayama University, and I'll talk about some writing classes that I taught asynchronously.
Okay, so if you need to refer to this slide, I put the link to these slides, which are on Google Drive, in the chat, and you can refer back to these, the details about our context. Okay, so here we go.
Whoops. Okay. I was going to just talk a bit, kind of summarize these rationales. It's interesting because we have sort of two different pulls. One is the idea that we want to go asynchronous to try to move some stuff off of our synchronous time. Another is just that in the future, things aren't going to go back to the way they are. And so we're probably going to have an opportunity to use some of these things. And that's actually where I'm coming from, is that I want to try to develop some things that I can use when things supposedly go back to normal. So please, Gretchen's put this in the link, and please take a look at it. But we kind of all had coming from different ideas, but it was all an idea of thinking about what asynchronous can bring to us and help us out on. So. And next slide, I guess.
Before we move on, can I just make one further comment? We were discussing the benefits of learner autonomy, and I think all of us are very much committed to providing a classroom that is autonomy friendly to our students, and this is a big consideration for all of us. I'm done.
Nice. Great. Thank you for that. We're going to talk about our approaches. Each of us are going to speak about 3 minutes on each on the way that we approached asynchronous classes. In my case, I had two sections of an oral communication course. I teach nursing students. I don't have really high goals for my students. They're basically, I want them to be able to communicate with a patient who is in the hospital. So make small talk, build a stronger relationship. So talking about your family, asking questions about someone else's family, talking about traveling, things like that. So what I did was, usually I have 4 topics that I do in a semester, but moving online, we didn't have a lot of time to prepare, and I was kind of making it up as I went along. So we did 3 topics, and each topic had 3 themes. So for example, travel, the students would do a theme on where they have gone, a theme on where they want to go, and a theme on where they would recommend going in their local area or in their country. With those themes, each class, each asynchronous class had 5 steps. There was an intro that had them doing notebooking, like a journal that they were keeping, new words, new expressions. And gradually I developed those materials myself because they were having a hard time really thinking of what they didn't know. So I developed materials for them to check, write their notebooks, and then take a picture and upload it to Google Classroom. And then after that, there was a quiz on Google Forms to see how much of that language that they could remember, listening that used that language, a writing assignment, which again used that language. And then the last step was a Flipgrid video. In the Flipgrid video, they're supposed to have a 90-second talk about not really a presentation or a speech, but just talk about that theme for 90 seconds. And they were in groups of 3 at that time, and each person in the group was responsible for going and then commenting on that person's Flipgrid. And they were supposed to have kind of a back and forth. That was ideally what I was hoping for. At the end of this topic, So in the fourth week, we had online speaking assessments. And this was done with a different group of 3. They had time to prepare, about a week. They used Google Chat to talk about what they were going to talk about in the assessment. And then I met them for 5 minutes on Google Meet. And we did that 3 times. In the last assignment, we only had 2 weeks left. So I took 2 students from the one group and 2 students from the other group, and I had them review and have a discussion about all the topics, make a video on their own, send me that video of their conversation, and then make a Flipgrid introducing someone from the other class. So it worked out really well. So in general, that was my oral communication class. Next, Gretchen.
Hey, everybody. I'm so glad to see so many people here. We have 41 people. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to talk about a listening class. And for actually the first month, I did not organize it. We have a coordinated curriculum, so I was in charge of planning the speaking classes, and my colleague planned the listening classes. But after about a month, he decided to go synchronous. And I can't do that in my house because I had my daughter at home. So everything I did had to be online. I couldn't spend any time, like real time, with the students. So I just had them do a listening journal. And I gave them like a list of websites, like ELT websites. For example, TED Ed, English Central, ELO, Breaking News English. And I found that just giving them a list was not, it was not too easy for them. They couldn't navigate it. So I made screencasts for how to navigate each website. And I put a video of myself talking about how to log in and how to find a good, suitable video and what have you. And these are really, really informal screencasts. And I just put them on a YouTube channel, and the students could access that and figure out on their own how to access these websites so they could practice their listening. And after they would listen to a video, they filled out a listening journal. And the previous version of the journal was just a summary. But because my class was completely online, I thought, okay, I want to see what these kids can do. So I made it reflective. I changed the journal up a little bit so that they would tell me what kinds of problems they were experiencing. And they also made goals for the following week. And through the filling out the journal and my comments, some of the students really took off and just listened and listened and listened. And it was really quite successful for some of the students. Another part or component of my class was a self-study with Quizlet, which I did not organize, my colleague did, but that was a portion of the assessment. That's all.
Okay, got on mute. So yeah, my path to asynchronicity was a little different. We've been using English Central as a supplement to our English classes, 2 part-time teachers and me as the tenured kind of supervisor. And when COVID hit, we decided to make English Central the main component of the class. Normally, we would ask them to do a specific amount of lines that they had to do by the end of the term. And we'd encourage them to do it every week, but a lot of them went the last week and then basically did a boot camp of English Central. So we said, well, it's going to be all English Central. Your attendance is you getting 100% on your requirement each week, which was supposed to be measured as 2.5 hours. And then we'd record that on a Google Docs so they could see that they were either making it or not. They had to attend 12 classes. So a lot of time in the first 4 or 5 weeks was making sure that students who fell down knew what to do, how to check on their phone to make sure they had 100%. Really a lot stricter than I usually am. It was like, if it was 99%, it was a batsu. And then for students who did 8 or 9 instead of the 12 required, we had some group interviews. And then we also had some group interviews for students who wanted to get a better grade. But it was really an asynchronous class. And one of the things I'm kind of interested in this next term is to just start adding a few more asynchronous parts, but keep it asynchronous, because I don't think we're supposed to have face-to-face classes, but I'm sure as soon as someone shows up with COVID, everything will go back to online. So I don't feel like it's good to shift back to all face-to-face and then try to go with asynchronous again. So that's basically what I'm trying to do. So Neil, next.
Okay, thank you, Joe. In my case, what I'm talking about is part of a more longer term project. I've long been interested in learner autonomy, and I have the philosophy that actually autonomy comes from having a very clear structure to the course design, and that both frees up the students and the teacher, because everybody knows what the guidelines are and what they should be doing all of the time. So with my courses, for some time I've been using the Moodle, which we're provided with at the university, to put all of the course materials online as self-access to the students, and use that as a way of being really, really transparent about the course structure and the assignments and assessment that I use in the course. The students, I make sure that the students can see that on the first day, and they're able to see their progress throughout the course. That's how I've been using the Moodle for quite a long time. So the change to emergency teaching didn't really change that. I've written on the slide Moodle, Teams and Stream, because those are the things we were asked to use by the university. We were asked not to use Zoom, like many universities, I think. I found that this allowed me some scope to actually provide on-demand lessons, due to the fact that the Teams meeting, which is a live session, is also recorded into Stream, which is the Microsoft version of YouTube, automatically and made available to the students in the particular course. So the students were able to actually access the Teams meeting, which was held at regular lesson times, from the Stream video function. In order to facilitate that, I was fairly careful about setting assignment deadlines loosely, starting early, finishing a bit later, so that students would actually be able to use the online materials for on-demand access to the course if that was necessary for them. So that's what I'm really talking about. I have different materials for each of the courses. That's all. So move to Neil C.
Thanks, Neil. I just want to echo your point about asynchronous approach can really allow for a very clear and consistent structure for the students each week. And I hope that's what I provided for academic writing class, which I did asynchronously. We have a textbook, and for students who couldn't buy the textbook, I uploaded copies of it on Moodle so they could access the activities each week. And I basically just asked the students to go through the textbook. And in addition to that, I made YouTube videos about different aspects of academic writing. So, for example, how to write an introduction, or how to create a reference list, for example. So that was one video per week that the students could look at. And there's two reasons really why I like to make videos. One is I think that students can look at them in their own time. They can rewind them, they can pause, They can study them again and again in their own time, which I think are good approaches to improve learner autonomy. But also, I think it's really important, if you never ever see the students, that at least they get an opportunity to see who you are. And so I think the videos did create some kind of teaching presence between myself and the students that I never met face to face. Each week, the students would email a bit of writing, one of the tasks from the textbook, plus some reflective writing. And then each week I would write back to the students. And I think that was quite arduous, but really, really important to keep in touch with the students when you don't see them in the classroom. And I think that it's a point I'll make later on, but I think it's, if you're new to asynchronous teaching, it's really, really important to contact your students as much and as often as you can and keep track of them. That's my bit.
Thank you, Neil. New slide.
Yes, please.
Thanks. So we're all going to talk a little bit about the assessment and feedback approaches that we took to our classes. In my case, I mainly focused on completion, whether or not the students were actually finishing the work in the time that I gave them, but I was really lenient and generous, and pretty much anybody who managed to finish before my final date, I gave points to. The main assessment for me was the speaking assessment that we held online. I recorded that, sent that individually to the students in the group, created a reflective activity where they had to transcribe and use some global feedback that I shared with everybody to then make changes, make kind of recommended changes to their own conversation. And usually these were related to pragmatic competency, like they weren't good at starting a conversation or ending a conversation, changing a topic. So I had them practice that on their own. Next, Gretchen.
Right. So my assessment really was just an end of term assessment, in that I just counted how many journals they did. They had to do a minimum of 12. That said, over the entire term, I gave them a bunch of feedback. Feedback is key if you want the students to learn by themselves. So my feedback started as just a friendly comment about the content of what they wrote, because I didn't want to put a lot of effort into it, because I didn't know if they were going back into the classroom or not. So I didn't. Then when it became clear that we weren't going back into the classroom, I started commenting on their summaries and how well they were writing in the journal, like, don't use Japanese, please, kind of those kind of comments. And then that morphed into some advice. So if they would tell me if they had some problems listening, I started giving them advice. So if you think the speaker is speaking too fast, try to slow down the video, because some of the websites will let you do that. If you're having trouble listening to an Indian speaker of English, go find another sample of audio and keep listening to those people from that country, because that'll help you be able to understand people from India in the future, things like that. And then finally, for maybe the last 6 weeks of the term, I just started counting how many journals they did and just gave them a number, because they had the hang of it already. They knew what they should do, and they knew that it was a practice task. So some of them really dug into this activity. I had a girl listen to like 35 videos over the course of the term, which for my low-level students is a ton. So I was really, really proud of them. That's all for me.
So yeah, for assessment for me, my kind of standard idea about assessment is I want to give a set of activities to students, and if they do it, they're guaranteed a credit. So, and a friend of mine who's working in Fukuoka kind of said that this whole COVID thing has changed her from a teacher to a manager. And I can understand that feeling. I feel like I'm checking off boxes. But honestly, if I felt like if the students would study English for the class for 2.5 hours a week, then I feel like I could give them a credit. I don't want to have to kind of, you know, force them to do, I mean, obviously the problem becomes with giving them an A, B, or a C. And I usually think of assessment like a driving test. I want the students to be able to drive the car first. So if they can drive the car, they're going to get a credit. And then after that, I can decide whether they get a B or an A. So what we did was say, if they get 12 weeks at 100% on English Central, they're going to get a B. If they want an A or an S, they need to take a final interview with us. If they're going below a B, we need to talk to them and make sure they understand, because we're really strongly encouraged by our university not to fail anyone. So we had to create something where we didn't want to fail them, but we didn't want to just give them the grade. And I mean, a lot of this asynchronous stuff, I think, is just trying to get students to put in a basic amount of work on a regular basis. And so one of the things that was interesting, that shifting from a supplement to the class that a lot of students did in the last week of the term to making sure they did it every week, had me talking to a lot of students saying, okay, the deadline's Sunday night, but why don't you make your deadline Friday night and take it on yourself and finish everything? And the people who are consistently at the deadline, just missing, I could sit them down and say, you know, this is not, you're waiting until 11 p.m. on Sunday night to do this, and you're not going to get through it. So a lot of my kind of ideas about asynchronicity is just to try to teach some really good study habits and learning habits to students. So my feedback was more for weak students, and I had an open door policy, well, open Zoom policy for students to contact me, and I could talk to them. So I talked to some of the upper level students. But feedback, I didn't really worry about so much because of the situation we were in. I wanted to be able to say, oh, these students have done 2.5 hours of English every week, so I have no problem with giving them credit. So, so that's about it. I'm sure there's some questions about that, but Neil, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very much on the same page with Joe there. My assessment is all about thinking whether the students are actually engaging with the course or not. So if I have for example, I had one student who was really fluent in English but did no homework and did not engage with the course, I will fail that student. Well, on the other hand, if I have a student that I can see regularly putting in the work, then that student will get a credit. I'm just thinking about my course and whether the students are engaging with the course and doing the work. So in this case, I'm very much doing assessment by written assignments. I've never felt that assessing students on their speaking ability is desirable. I think that if a student is good at English, they'll be able to write it. And so that's kind of my criterion. If the students do the written assignments and put them in regularly, I make deadlines that are spread over the course in order to get regular study from them. That's what I'm looking for. I found the Moodle function adequate for that. I'm done. Over to you, Neil.
Oh, thanks. As I mentioned earlier, I asked the students to send some writing each week. And I think one important point is that that's come out of this emergency remote teaching situation is that a lot of students have had to do perhaps a lot more work than they would normally in a face-to-face class, because teachers, you know, want to see that they're actually doing something. And maybe writing is a little bit different from that, in that you can get students to do assignments that they would normally do anyway in a face-to-face class. I think what was different for me is that in a face-to-face class, I would have asked students to submit work maybe every 3 or 4 weeks. Whereas in the asynchronous class, I asked them to do it every week. So I was getting a smaller amount of work each week, but more regularly. And to reply to that was somewhat arduous. But I used a template and a rubric, which I just copied and pasted for each student. So after a few weeks, it took me an hour, say, to do 25 students. One class is 25 students. So, and I think that was time well worth spending. And I didn't really give individual comments. I would gather, mistakes or errors or consistent kind of misconceptions, and then put that into the lesson plan for the following week. But I wouldn't keep repeating the same comments to students. I would just give very, very supportive comments. I think it was really important to be very, very positive about what they'd done. So if you look, I can see somebody in the chat has asked for my template. My template is a very short, very, very positive message to students, and I'll try and find it and copy it and put it into the chat. But I was really focused on, this is something we have to do together. You've done so well by writing to me, well done. Even if I didn't think the writing was particularly good, I was very, very positive about it. And I think that, to me anyway, that's really, really important part of asynchronous, to be incredibly encouraging to the students. Stunned
Nice.
silence.
Nice. Thank you, Neil. Sorry, doing too many things at the same time. Gretchen, if you could change the slide, thank you, to negatives. I'm going to, actually, we're all going to basically just give a really brief explanation of what we thought was bad about the approach that we took. In my case, passive participants. I had a small handful of the 60 students who just didn't interact with others. They didn't get into chat with their group members. They didn't respond to group members' videos, and it always left people hanging. And I felt bad for those people, and there wasn't much I could do about it. Gretchen, how about you?
I don't really have any negatives. I was really quite pleased with what some of my students did. I hope to get the students who didn't make the minimum of 12, I hope to get them on board next term somehow. Maybe a Zoom session with them might help. I'm not sure. I'll have to find out what the problem was. Thank you.
How about you, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, mine was a special case. I had come back from Korea, so I was sort of really out of sync with the rest of the school. I also wanted to make sure that the 2 part-time teachers weren't overloaded, because one of them is a full-time part-time who is retired but is now kind of trying to put together his classes. And he's got, I think, 15 classes at 4 different universities. So I really wanted him especially to say, look, we're going to do this, and you're going to meet students, but you don't have to prepare anything. Chat to the students. I did write up in Facebook in OTJ about how we kind of bumped heads, because he sort of felt like, well, I'm doing these things and no one's talking. And I said, well, don't worry. I mean, if they're doing the English Central, that's fine. So I guess the negatives are thinking that we're still kind of in an F to F mode. Kind of really shifting your idea of how you're going to do things to asynchronous. So, yeah.
How about you, Neil? Neil.
Okay, well, I mean, this is a statement of the obvious that if you have asynchronous learning, then speaking practice is very difficult to include in that. And for me, that was the biggest negative. I'm a teacher because I like meeting people, and I think that, speaking in the classroom is really essential for students to actually learn to communicate in a foreign language well. And I don't feel that I provided that as well on with the online service that I was providing was in no way compares to what I do in the classroom. And go back to something that Joe mentioned. He said that he felt he's become like a manager. Well, at first I was very kind of I became very demoralized. I didn't like not meeting the students. You can't see the students with Teams. I did voluntary Zoom sessions, which gradually fell off as the students' homework piled up. But I'll say that actually I did get used to it. And by the end of the course, I was kind of better with that. And I felt, well, this is too bad and it can't be helped. So I think you can you can overcome the initial negatives of being a manager. That's all.
Great. And Neil C., how about you?
Yeah, I think initially the negatives were that the email load was high, but I did get used to that and gradually built up some good templates and good models that I could use for all the students rather than just some of them. And then I made a lot of videos, and making videos is time consuming, and although I do enjoy it, and that's kind of my main sort of research interest is video area. And those videos, of course, now I can use them for other classes as well. I don't have to remake them all for the coming fall term. So that will save a lot of time then. So basically the feedback, I think, is the main initial negative. Thank you.
Nice, thanks. Go to the next slide. So positives. For me, basically, students could do it anywhere, anytime, and as many times as they wanted to do it. My nursing students are busy. I know the priority is on their nursing classes. So if they could just fit in 10 minutes a day, any time of the week to finish something, I was happy. Gretchen, how about you?
Like I keep saying, I felt the way I structured the course gave the students choices and freedom to navigate their own learning experience, which I've never really had an opportunity to explore because we're always doing like the textbook, or we're doing like the curriculum that's been set up by someone else. And so it was really nice just to have like kind of step back and just see what these kids can do. And I'm new at this school and I don't know them at all, so it was nice because I could get to know them through the journal. So I highly recommend it.
Nice. Joe?
For me, positives. I learned a lot more ways to show students how to do things. Figured out how to show my phone on the Zoom so I could step them through things. A lot of, these making screencasts and things like that. I really upped my game with all of that. And I always knew that they spent a lot of time very late at night doing their homework. And, so that kind of confirmed my belief for me. So one of the positives was giving them a way to get out, doing things according to their schedule rather than according to mine. So.
How about you, Neil M.?
Well, this was a very anxious time for everybody suddenly going online. At the start of the course, I was seeing a lot of emails from students asking me to clarify exactly what they wanted me to do, what I wanted them to do. But I think the fact that I had this really clear course structure set up and gradebook available to them, once they realized how that worked and that the gradebook was there in front of me, the emails stopped. Another thing that I heard was from the office staff at the university. They said that they were getting inundated with calls from students saying, oh, I don't know what to do. I can't understand what the teacher's saying and I'm worried I'm going to fail the course. They said they didn't get a single call about my course. So I think that's pretty important to make it really clear to the students what is required to them and be very transparent about that. So that was a positive, I think, of my asynchronous teaching approach.
Nice, great. we've gone through basically the main points of our presentations, and we want to open up the floor now to questions. If possible, could you raise your hand within the participant window? Because I can only see a few people on my screen at the moment, so I won't be able to see if you raise your hand. So I'm just going to start with one question that we received in chat, and it was from P. McG. Could we talk about, sorry, I like the name too. Could we talk about the amount of time that was spent in terms of prep, and then, you know, in checking, you know, the assignments that you set, following up with students? How much time do we put into asynchronous learning? Who would like to go? Gretchen.
I'll just say I wrote my response to that question in the chat, so you can read it for the details. So it's there. You can download the chat from the session at the end, everyone. So.
Okay. Neil, you had an answer?
Yeah, I spent a ton of time creating quizzes and assignments and doing marking, but the positive side of that is that I have that made now. So next spring, when we're still doing this emergency teaching, I'll have my course completely made and I'll be doing nothing. So I put in a lot of work at the start, but I expect to be on easy street by next April.
Yeah. Neil or Joe, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I did a lot more I do a lot of front loading and getting students on these apps or getting them to do something or making sure they understand. And that was all taken away from me because I only got back at the end of February. Normally I'd have like the first term, so I had to compress all that. But I found it was possible, and I think that if you always think about front loading things, what kind of Google spreadsheets can you make to keep track of everyone? Can you get everyone's name? When we started, you know, a lot of people, it exposed the system where people were getting the names like the second class. You know, there's a lot of things that we could do, you know, a month before if we can get names out of schools. And I know it's different for part-time and full-time and depending on what you are and how registration is. But I think there's a lot of ways to kind of front load things so that the asynchronous parts go better rather than, oh, we're going to start now with asynchronous. You're actually really starting a month before, getting the students' names, making sure they're online, making sure they have downloaded the app, those sorts of things.
In my case, we were given a week between the decision to go online and the first class. And I had already been kind of preparing something online for students, but it wasn't a system. It wasn't something that, you know, students could just go into and easily follow. And so from pretty much the start of the first class, I was creating the system and unsure of what that system was going to look like. Just that I knew at this time I wanted this and I wanted to try this. And so it was like experimenting for the entire first topic. And I went crazy because as I'm creating things, I'm also responding to students who I've never met, who've never met each other, who've never used Google Classroom before, some who just bought their very first smartphone when they entered the university. And they've got questions that I can't deal with. Google Classroom, I wasn't familiar with the settings and I was getting emails for the dumbest things. And I was getting emails from the staff at the same time. So I kind of missed everything. Because I'm trying to keep up with things, but someone, Richard Bailey in the comments said, I pretty much was dealing with stuff all day, 7 days a week. And that's how I felt at the beginning. By mid-semester, I hit my stride. I knew what my routine was. I knew what the structure was. I'm gonna keep that structure for the second semester. So it'll be a lot easier to prepare for. All of the prep work I'm doing now, so the feedback will be the only thing I need to do during the semester. So I feel I'll be in a really good place for the second semester. And I think that will improve the quality of my lessons. I was flying by the seat of my pants. My students knew it. I told them that time and time again. I said, don't worry about what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing either. You know, we're getting through this together. Yeah, so be prepared. If you're not giving yourself a lot of time to set something up, if you're not sure what it's going to look like and you're experimenting, and you have to do all of this experimenting while actually carrying it out with real people, then it can be quite crazy at first. But out of craziness, I think you can create something really, really good through some experimentation.
Glenn, did you have a question for Matt? I see a hand raised, Glenn.
Oh,
Glenn
sorry,
and
I had my
John.
volume turned down just a little. This is for my friend and colleague, Neil McClellan there. You said something at one point that I just wanted you to clarify. I thought I heard you say, if students can speak the English, they can write it. And I'm going to disagree until I know what exactly you may have meant.
What I said was, I have a feeling that if students can do English, they can write it. So I have an issue about the kind of opportunities that young people have as they grow up, which are not equal. We see lots of students going off to, on expensive foreign study trips to New Zealand and something like that because they're privileged. And so I've always had an issue with, I will not just automatically give an A grade to a student because they can talk to me in English really, really well. I think that we have two things in our assessment that we have to keep in mind. One is the message that we send to future employers. And so, yes, if somebody is excellent at English, you should consider giving them credit for that. But if they're not actually engaging with the course, that's not a good student to me. So kind of what I'm saying is to sort of like I was trying to summarize that attitude in a flippant expression. But what I'm looking for there is that the students are actually engaging with the course. I don't want to do videos because, recorded videos, because I think that's a very poor assessment, not only of their speaking ability, but also of their, engagement with a course of study that should be a regular business, weekly engagement. So that's my thinking about assessment. And so I'm satisfied with taking written assignments from students from a course in a school.
Matthew, can I just hop in there for just a second? Because there was actually another sort of interesting issue I wanted to bring up, is that the pace of the technological change is really quite amazing. And I'm doing English Central, and I don't get, I just picked it out about 8 years, I think 7 or 8 years ago, and started using it to provide students with some extra. And I've done it every year. And so it wasn't that much to shift everything. But right now, English Central and other kind of apps like that, like they're using AI, and they want to try to get to a point where they get students to like talk to AI and then have it reply and create a conversation. And so I can imagine in even like the next 5 years that some of these apps will allow students to practice their English with a computer that's speaking to it, giving it random enough clues and working on their pronunciation. And then we're sort of like just waiting and giving them help when they ask for it. And kind of another trend that we have is these self-access centers where the students are not being taught a specific set of skills, but they're kind of told, okay, you need to do this. And if you need help, you go to the self-access center. So that seems to be another sort of trend that's pushing towards asynchronous teaching. So it's kind of, now is really a good time to start thinking about that, rather than, okay, how much am I going to do in one class? And how much am I going to present to students in one class? Whereas how much are students going to bring to me that I can help them with?
Okay, thank you. We've got another question from John Helwig.
Yeah.
Yeah, the comment before about so much email.
Mm.
I've been using Line for the past 5 years, and it works well. I set up a Line group for each class that I have, and the students join the group. I can broadcast information to the Line. It can either go to their PC or to their phone, depending on how they have the thing set up. And the students can contact me easily, directly using the Line chat function, and I don't have to worry about keeping track of them in any sort of an email server. I used to create individual emails for each class, and then I'd have to go and open each individual email to see whether people had sent something. Using Line, I get a little notice, and I can easily respond to it without having to open an email on my browser or anything like that, and that has saved a ton of time.
In my case, the emails actually weren't from students; they were from systems. And there was nothing at first. I didn't know what to do about it. Later on, I found that I could manipulate Google settings, and I could limit the amount of messages coming from the system. Flipgrid sends messages as well. Students will flag a video for some reason. Maybe they messed up and they wanted me to delete it. So rather than sending me an email or a line message, they just hit, they get a bunch of their friends to hit delete the video or flag the video, flag the video, flag the video. And I have no idea why it's being flagged. So yeah, I agree though. I was using Google Chat to have students interact with each other. I tried using it like Line at first, and I didn't really have much success with it. I really just wanted to use Line, to be honest, but was dissuaded by my university. Using my private Line with school business was frowned upon. So.
Yeah, well, basically, I just only use Line for my school.
Yeah.
I have a few other people that are on it, but nothing. It's basically all 99% of the people on it are students or past students. And the other thing about Line is students can contact me 5 years from the past. Because I keep the groups open, and I don't delete anyone. If they, I tell them this up front. You want to contact me in a couple years, I'll still be here online. You can contact me. Now, for me, I've been teaching basically synchronous content-based class all semester. So I'm on Zoom 90 minutes. So my experience is a little bit different than you guys. But it's interesting to hear how you guys have been doing the asynchronous thing. So thank you very much.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Len, your hand is raised.
Matt,
Yeah.
remember that we have one
yes.
slide.
Yes. We do have one more slide if there are no other questions. And we discussed sticking around. All of us can stay for maybe another half hour if you want to stay in the room and ask us more questions. But the final slide is just basically one point advice. It came up a lot in the chat, but about interaction, that, for example, an English speaking class should have interaction in it. And I believe that my students did get more interaction from my asynchronous class than they would have had in my face-to-face class. They were chatting, they were put into groups of 3 for the entire month for a topic, and they had to chat in Google Chat, and I could watch all of them chatting. And not everybody, but the majority of students did a good job on Google Chat. They opened their own meets, and they would practice for the speaking assessments in the meets. I really did feel they were doing more interaction in those instances than they would have gotten in practicing role plays and conversations in my speaking class. Yeah. So yeah, I think you can do it. On to you, Gretchen.
Okay. The screencast feature is just gold. Once I discovered Loom, which is a free screencast like website, I just had so much fun making these videos, and just knowing that the students wouldn't be emailing me and asking me any questions because they could just watch my video just made me really happy. So I highly recommend Loom for screencast.
Nice. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, my advice, well, I don't know if it's advice, but what I did, I think it's better to kind of do one app well rather than kind of try to do 7 apps. And I know it's kind of dangerous because if the app changes in midterm, like it often does, or if suddenly they go to a new model, you can be left high and dry. But I think it's better to kind of concentrate on one app so you can answer all the questions to students rather than trying to juggle 5 or 6 apps to cover, you know, oh, I'm going to do all of these apps to make sure it's a fully asynchronous class.
Yes, Neil.
Okay, so I mean, I'm constantly thinking about how I can make the course available to students as a choice of either live or as on demand. And I'm not against breakout rooms or anything like that. And there is even a possibility to do that in Teams. But I was often thinking about, well, if I record a video onto stream and I'm doing a breakout room, how's that going to look and how does that work? And then I heard a very simple, elegant idea from Bill Pello, credit where it's due, which is, you know, it's okay to do have a breakout room in your recorded session, but just put up a screensaver saying back in 5 minutes or something, just like you would if you were in a shop and you're just popping out for a short time. That way, anybody joining late can see that they only just need to wait 5 minutes. Anybody watching the video, they know they can just shoot the video on 5 minutes and nobody's going to object to that. So I think that's a really good idea for how to cope with combining live and on-demand delivery. I'm done.
Nice. And Neil.
Oh, thank you. I think I mentioned communicating with students a few times, and I think it can be take a lot more time initially than in a face-to-face lesson, but it's really worth doing to create a positive community of learners, and also to prevent problems of students that drop out or you don't know where they are, or something that's happened with the technology. And so that's my one point is if you can really focus on connecting with your students from day one.
Nice. Good. Wonderful. Nice point to finish on. We are going to stick around. If anybody else would like to stay and ask us questions, we'll be here. Also, on the OTJ page, you can visit the event and you can ask us questions there as well. I think if you tag us, we should appear, be able to see it, I hope. Yeah. So thank you for coming today.
For coming.
So everything after this is extra. So thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. That was good job. Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was wild.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
Is that the real background, Mark, or is that?
That is my deck.
Okay.
Is it-
You know,
It's
they
moving.
always
It's
look-
moving.
Yeah, these backgrounds, you know, you're never quite sure sometimes. I mean,
Never quite-
obviously mine's not.
Well, and actually, and this sounds really tacky, but I swear to God, I've listened to every word, but I am barbecuing at the moment.